When I first started making notes for this episode, I had some concern about being typecast as a wannabe running podcast. I'm not as concerned now because I had the episode with Russ just before this, but at the time I talked about Mid-State Mile. I had used the Running Man Festival as a backdrop for a conversation, and then I had this kind of ready to go, or was starting to get it ready to go. I'm going to talk to you today about some things that were reinforced for me as I ran a 100-mile trail race in September. So if you're tired of hearing me talk about running, then just think of it as an adventure. That's kind of how I see the longer races in particular. Anyway, just traveling through the wilderness for a prescribed distance, enjoying creation, and trying to overcome whatever challenges may arise. Those of you that have been around remember that I ran the Georgia Jewel Trail 100 last September for the first time, and I recorded a podcast about that experience called Asking Big Questions. It's episode 14. So if you haven't heard it, go check that out at some point. You don't have to have listened to that for this one to make any sense. Just know that it's out there. I knew pretty early in the year that I wanted to run again, that race in particular. I didn't start training any sooner, but I knew I would run nonetheless. And as much as I tried to keep an open mind and remember that no two adventures are the same, I probably secretly thought I could manufacture some of the same experience because I had more knowledge about the course. I had a little more experience as a runner, and I thought I could probably make it a little bit the same, at least in the ways that I enjoyed. And while there were some similarities, it was a pretty different experience for me from year one. And those differences created a great space for me to be challenged and to learn and grow. I'm going to tell you all about it in just a minute. In particular, the challenges and the opportunity for growth, a little bit about the race. And I'm going to share all this with the hopes that it resonates with and encourages you in your life in some way, shape, or form. But first, welcome to the Everyday Grit Podcast. Conversations to help you think critically, live abundantly, and endure the everyday. I'm your host, Nathan Hicks, and I'm very glad that you're here. Before we get into the episode, let's grab a review and some feedback. And this review, I overlooked it at some point. I'm not exactly sure when it came in, but I don't think that I have shared it. It's from LBB!789. This person writes, "Thank you, Nathan, for not only sharing your perspective, but for also sharing multiple perspectives. It's definitely beneficial to me to be able to use these different perspectives to identify, analyze, challenge, and respond to my own. Thank you for sharing." Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening. More importantly, thank you for thinking critically about the content and how to apply it best personally. Honestly, I can't wish for anything greater from a listener. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for sharing. I would love to know who you are. So if you don't mind, shoot me a message and just say, "Hey, that was me, LBB!789. You don't have to, but it'd be great. I got a message from Edgar Mills after the Running Man episode. He wrote, "The Running Man episode is solid. I think you and I get along so well because of the no frills foundation we both have." That is 100% true. I love the open door, closed door analogy. And as far as a seat at the table, I don't want a seat at anyone else's. I'll continue to make my table as big as possible. That is such an Edgar thing to say. And I love that dude. He and I have become good friends over the last few years. He's a solid guy. And I always love to hear his perspective because I know it's well thought out. I don't always know what's going to come out of his mouth when he opens it, but I know it will be well thought out. And it's not always the same perspective as mine, which is kind of perfect. And as far as making his table as big as possible, you can trust that he's doing that with the best of intentions, and that can't be said for everyone. So check him out at Osprey Shooting Solutions and listen to him on the Junto podcast. All right, let's get to it. Why? I guess let's start with that. It seems to be a good on-ramp to the conversation. Last year, I was satisfying a curiosity and answering questions. That kind of sums up my why. Can I do this? What does it feel like to do this, etc. This year, the short answer to the why question is just because I wanted to. I had a great time at last year's race, and I wanted to do it again because I trusted it would be enjoyable, it would be challenging, it would present growth opportunities, and good things would come from it. Our why, quote unquote why, can be very important, especially when we're doing something that seems daunting. And it can be helpful to have it deeply developed and well thought out so that it serves to motivate us, when the going gets tough. But also, we don't have to overthink it. We don't have to overthink the question of why. We don't have to go out of our way to make it more than it is. Our why doesn't always have to be profound or enormously transformative, even if the thing in question is a significant undertaking. Enjoyable, challenging, good things will come from it. That's reason enough to do anything, barring some other reason being present that's of higher importance or priority that says you shouldn't do it. Last year's effort came with some pretty significant kind of baked in motivation. It was my first attempt at running 100 miles. And so I was answering that can I do it question. I had one chance to do it before ushering in a new decade because my birthday was 10 days later or something. And I knew that it was probably the only chance to run 100 miles while my dad was still alive to see it happen. And that turned out to be the case. But I knew that going in, this is probably the only time I'm going to have a chance to do that. All three of those things were pretty big motivators for me to draw on when things got difficult last year. This year, the motivation was almost purely intrinsic. Can I show that the first time wasn't a fluke? Can I rise to new challenges? Can I improve in some way, shape, or form? Can I follow through just because I want to? Let's do this just because it's what we're doing. Training started off well enough. I hired John and Becca. That's kind of a no-brainer for me. And we were off and going, kind of right after Mid-State Mile. I started training in earnest. Midway through the summer, I realized that I had treated each of the 100-mile efforts like I was cramming for a test. I did this year one, and I was doing it again this year. Essentially waiting till the last minute, trying to squeeze in just enough training to see me through the effort, get me to a place physically where it wasn't too far out of reach for me to do it. And it occurred to me maybe this is not the best approach, and maybe I'm missing out on the benefits of a long-term approach to running. And in particular, I think what I realized is that my body could probably respond more significantly if I ran all year long, not just wait until the summer. And I wondered then if I had much chance of seeing like a great performance change, if I could really improve greatly on performance, having not really trained anymore, actually trained less this year. Anyway, that occurred to me. And so something shifted in my approach at that moment, and the race became more one step in a longer process than it did an end unto itself. And as an extension of that approach, I solidified my goals for this year's race. The first was to finish. I think for the foreseeable future, maybe forever, that will always be the primary objective. The second was to take better care of myself throughout the effort, namely in the way that I did hydration and nutrition, so that when I got to the end of the race, I had more to give. Third was to try to learn something about the process, to learn more about running, learn more about racing, because year one, kind of I just had my head down trying to make sure I got through it. I don't know how much attention I was paying to the finer points of the process. So this year I wanted to try to learn something of the process and pay a little more attention to it. And then the fourth was to improve over last year's time, if at all possible, given the other three things. I continued to train. Things were going well. Training wasn't as stressful as it was the first go around because I had the experience and the knowledge that this is how it goes and it's all right. Then late in the summer, things began to get a little crazy schedule-wise. And it wasn't so unexpected, but I began really having a hard time getting in the prescribed training. I'd miss a run here, miss a run there. Strength training became almost non-existent. A few times I missed a whole week of training. And this is not exactly what you want to do as you prepare to stare down a 100-mile race. And I know there were some days that I missed purely due to my mismanagement of my own schedule. But there were a lot of days that were just me responding to life and choosing to give my time and energy and effort to what I deem as higher priorities than training, which even if you know that's what you're doing, even if you know my attention is needed here, it's very frustrating because you know what's coming. The race doesn't care. There's a date on the calendar that it's going to show up, and sooner or later, you're going to have to pay the fiddler for the dance, as the lyric goes. I welcomed September with an easy 10-mile effort on Labor Day, which was following a long run 2 days prior, and then I did almost nothing for the next 18 days until the race start. The little shakeout 4-miler, I think the Sunday before the race, but just worked and did life for the next 18 days. I knew September was going to be tight because of work and some weekend travel for family stuff. So my plan, a little bit all along, had been to try to rest, eat well, and move when I could, kind of have a long taper. I was marginally successful at that at best. Some might say I was unsuccessful. It ended up being a pretty stressful season. It required a lot, and I didn't get the rest that I was aiming for or hoping for. That's just how it went. We don't always get to dictate the terms of life. Sometimes all we can do is respond, even if responding well means giving up something in exchange. By the time race week rolled around, I was really exhausted, and my body felt anything but loose and ready to run. It felt pretty terrible, actually. So I did a few things early that week to try to loosen up. I went for some walks. I went to the gym one morning and spent about 45 minutes foam rolling and doing some mobility. So much so that later that afternoon, I felt like complete garbage. And it turned out the foam rolling had essentially been like a deep tissue massage, just dumping all sorts of stuff out of my lymphatic system. So it was good in the long run, just a little bit of a rough day. I joked with some friends that week that I was testing a new strategy where you fill your life with so much stress leading up to a race that when it comes time to run, the idea of running 100 miles seems like a pleasant alternative to the stress that you've been experiencing, and away you go. I was tired enough that week that it felt prudent to spend at least a little time thinking about whether or not I should change course. I could run a shorter distance, or I could not run at all. Or I could obviously proceed as planned and attempt the 100-miler. Sometimes it makes sense to change course, honestly. And sometimes, as they say, discretion is the better part of valor. So I needed to consider, is there a risk management concern here? Might I hurt myself by attempting this? Is this purely ego? Like, am I only driven by external validation that comes with running 100 miles? Is this inconsistent with my primary goal? So if I had had a goal that I really wanted to run under a certain time, then maybe it would make sense to change course, because this would definitely be inconsistent with that goal. Is my fall off in preparation going to adversely affect others? It's not lost on me that crew and pacers are giving up time. They're giving up sleep and energy and money to come be there. And I didn't want my fall off in preparation to negatively affect them. I also had to ask myself, is this just me not wanting to risk failure or unnecessary suffering? So I felt like I could get through the 100 miles. I didn't know how much I was going to suffer, and I didn't want to suffer unnecessarily. And I guess that sounds dumb, because in some sense, I could just not run. And there's a point at which it's all unnecessary. I get that. But I didn't want to suffer exponentially more than was necessary to do the thing. And I didn't want to not run it only because I was afraid of failing. That last point is going to make sense to some of you. It may not make sense to all of you. That's all right. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. The external consequences for me changing a distance or not running at all were negligible, like really zero. It's not like I had a sponsorship on the line. It's not like a lot of people have a vested interest in what I do with my time and my endurance efforts. So I could have easily bowed out or, changed distance, whatever. Or I could proceed as planned, ready or not, because sometimes it makes sense to proceed, even if we don't feel up for it. And in some areas of life, quite honestly, we don't have a choice. The deadline comes regardless of how we feel about it, and we've got to do the thing. In this case, I really wanted to run. And the thought of not doing so was disappointing. There was no relief in that to me. I hoped that running would provide a break from some of life's stress that I had been experiencing and more or less create a vacuum where I was only concerned about running for 20 to 30 hours. Opting out in reality would have negatively impacted others also, because as odd as it may seem, the Chet that runs the crew loves it, really enjoys it. The people that were pacing me were there because they wanted to be there. And so it would have negatively impacted them for me to quit as much, maybe more than if I just got out there and was slower than I wanted to be. And it was consistent with my goals to carry on. My goals, as I stated, were not specifically tied to a performance or a time. And so if it took me longer than I wanted, I still had room to accomplish those other goals. So I chose to proceed as planned based on that idea that sometimes it's time to do the thing before we feel ready to do it. And there's good opportunity for learning in that space. Once I made the decision, I was settled with it, but I felt stress around two specific things. One was, how would the suboptimal training play out? What would the consequences of my falling off training in late summer be? And similarly, but a little different, how would less than ideal rest, so the sleep part of it specifically, impact me? And this question came from the fact that I've led far more courses than I want to admit on pretty terrible sleep going into it. So the night or two before course, I get bad sleep because I'm just getting ready to go and getting the rest of life squared away. But the minute I hit the trail, my body just clicks and says, oh, this is what we're doing. We've done this a lot. Let's make it happen. And the lack of sleep affects me very little. The thing about that scenario, though, is all I have to do is get to night one, and then I'm probably going to get pretty decent rest. Whereas in this race, I knew I wasn't going to get rest until it was done. And oddly enough, that was a motivating factor for me at times. Just if you get up and keep going, you get to sleep sooner. But the stress of these two uncertainties began to grow, and I was kind of ruminating on them. And the week of the race, I recognized I needed to flip a switch or two mentally and push back against this stress. I saw that it was distracting me from other race-related things that needed my attention. And honestly, it was becoming an obstacle in and of itself. So I knew that I needed to lean into this and give it some intentional effort and address these things. So here's what I did, and what I would encourage you to do when faced with any type of ready or not situation. The first is accept reality for what it is. Quit revisiting the past. Quit beating yourself up over how you got into the situation. Quit beating yourself up whether it was a result of your own doing, the result of someone else's actions, or just circumstance in general. We can sometimes revisit the past and how we got here and get so wrapped around the axle about that it keeps us from looking forward, which is exactly what we need to do. It's time to focus attention and action on the task at hand and put an effort toward the present and the coming reality, because those two things we can impact. We can't undo what has been done. And so for me, I tried to quit worrying about how it was that September was here and I had trained as little as I trained. I tried to quit beating myself up for maybe getting priorities out of line or anything that I could have done that got us here. I tried to kind of drop the frustration at things that were out of my control that had happened and impacted me, and just shifted my focus to what was coming and what was at hand. The second thing to do is stop entertaining unproductive what-if thoughts. It sounds so easy when you say it. Some what-if thoughts are helpful for preparation and creating contingencies. Others, however, are very harmful. They create stress rather than alleviate it, and they're usually circular or cyclical in nature, meaning there's no way to resolve them. They just come back on themselves over and over again. It's just worry upon worry. So I did my best in this case to dismiss them when they came around, and certainly they came around. But you have all of these, what if this happens, what if that happens, and there's no end to them. There's no point. It's not helping you prepare. It's just worry. And I have found it's hard to not worry. It is easier to think about something different. And that's what I tried to do. That's the way that I tried to stop entertaining these unproductive what if thoughts. The third thing to do is adjust or build a narrative based on your current reality. Assess the situation, assess self, make a plan, even if the plan is open-ended in some regard. Revisit your why, take stock of some of the mental tools that you have for when things get tough, kind of on and on it goes. I unpack this in more detail in an episode called The Voice Inside Your Head. I don't remember which number it was, but you can go back and I unpack building a narrative. The fourth thing to do is flip a switch, and it's largely a mental exercise, but flip a switch to try to shift the way that you're thinking about a particular thing. In this case, for me, I needed to switch from analysis to action. So again, quit analyzing how we got where we are and flip the switch to taking action to make what's coming better. I needed to switch from uncertainty to confidence. So there's a part where all that has led up to now kind of creates an uncertainty within you. But when it's time to do the thing and you have decided to, or you have no choice to, then it's time to be confident. And so make that mental adjustment. I needed to switch from being timid and uncertain and worried to being bold. I needed to shift from a training-derived confidence to an identity-based confidence. I needed to rest in the fact that I'm capable of and willing to endure. All this summed up, I needed to focus on how, not if, I was going to complete this race. I would say the same goes for other challenges as well. It is a subtle but very important shift in mindset. And that was a lot of setup to get to those four things, which I kind of breezed past. But as the race day approached, that's what I tried to do to be ready. And as quickly as I can spout them off, it took a little work that I think was worthwhile in that week of the race. And I think those four things, as I've implied, can be applied across many areas of life when you're facing that ready or not situation. So that's what I did. Let's talk about how it played out. To sum it up, I would say that challenges came earlier and looked differently than what I expected when I signed up for the race. There were three challenges that stand out. The first and second were ultimately resolved pretty quickly, though they did present struggles that I had to intentionally work through. The third lingered for most, if not all of the race. So the first was, I had this muscle twitch in one of my quads. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was inside of the first 18 miles of the race. And when it happened, I was surprised by it. And I was curious, trying to diagnose its cause. Like, is this caused by fatigue? Is this my body's response to weeks of essentially inactivity, and now we're doing consistent activity? Is this just my body being slow to warm up? Like, what's going on? Because inside of 18 miles is far, far, far too early to be experiencing muscle fatigue, in my mind, given that I'm trying to run 100 miles. It caused concern for me because it was unexpected, because it came early, and because there was so much running left ahead of me. And so it created some room for doubt to creep in. That was the first thing. The second thing, it was sometime later, but still really early in the race. And I'm going to say within the first 20, 25 miles. I don't remember exactly where, but I think it was after the first aid station, which is our first crew stop, which is mile 18. Anyway, sometime later, still early in the race, some of the things that had been creating stress prior to the race started to try to get a foothold in my mind. And my brain started mulling them over, trying to troubleshoot and problem solve. And it just wasn't the place for it. I wasn't going to resolve any of those things out there, but my brain started worrying about them, trying to figure them out. I was surprised that it's crept in, and I was more than a little frustrated. I could feel the anxiety trying to build in my mind and my body. and for reasons that had nothing to do with the task at hand. It had nothing to do with the race. It was, we'd been in an automobile accident. Someone hit us, totaled our Land Cruiser, and I was going round and round with insurance, trying to get the right evaluation, trying to find a new vehicle, in addition to it just being a busy month work and family wise. And there were some other things going on. So my brain is trying to solve these problems while I'm running. And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. And for a few minutes, I was mad about it because it was involuntary. I didn't decide I'm going to think about these things while I run. They just were like, hey, you're going to think about this while you run. So I was mad about it, and I was angry that these things had invaded or were seeking to invade, this, what is for me a sacred space of wilderness and movement. And my hope of stepping into a vacuum seemed like it was slipping away. That was the second thing, these outside forces trying to come in. The third thing was that I was tired. I mean, so tired, as in sleepy. And this resulted in periods of lightheadedness or dizziness, kind of this feeling woozy. That feeling you get when you're trying to stay awake driving and you're just swimmy headed? It was sort of like that, only I was running instead of driving. Occasionally, when it was bad, I would stop and lean against a tree, or I would bend over and put my head on top of my trekking poles just to let this wave of dizziness or whatever pass. In one section, I'll reference it again later, I tried to see if I could sleep a little bit while I was moving. It was like you're on this old road, kind of gravel road bed. And I was like, maybe I can take 5 or 10 steps with my eyes closed. Anyway, I wasn't too successful, but often I would think, as I said earlier, all I have to do is finish this race and then I can go to sleep. Now, it made complete sense to me why this challenge came up, but it was still very difficult and it was persistent. It was something that I had to face. And the fact that I didn't struggle at all with sleep last year, zero. I was concerned about it. It wasn't an issue at all. It meant that this was a new challenge and I had no experience facing it, feeling it, solving it, none of it. These three things, muscle fatigue, outside stress, and weariness, came together and presented a mental hurdle that I had to get over, in addition to addressing each of these things in turn. And the refrain that rolled through my mind, this was almost like a fourth thing, but it was just the sum of the parts. The refrain that rolled through my mind was, this isn't the work that I wanted to do. And it's coming up way too early in the race for me to have to be dealing with it. I'm supposed to be settling into the run, enjoying being on the trail, getting a break from the outside world. I'm supposed to be focusing on hydration and nutrition, making sure I run the runnable sections of the trail, managing aid stations, not worrying about these things. And in my frustration, I got dangerously close to falling into a trap that I know happens with these types of efforts. In fact, I talk about it on day one of the reckoning. I began to experience this emotional overflow or overlap where you allow emotions from outside of your current experience to get dragged into it. Often, I won't go too far into how it happens, but often there's a similar set of thoughts or feelings surrounding these different parts of our life. And something opens the door connecting two or more of them. For me, the common denominators were having to address problems I didn't want to, my perceived inability to remedy them or fix them, and the opportunity cost or additional workload of having to do so, either unexpected things that I had to do plus the other things, or giving up things I wanted to do because I had to deal with them. That was happening outside the race, and now suddenly I found that it was happening inside the race. And I had this thought, I can't believe it. I cannot escape the lack of control and having to solve problems that I don't want to solve. I can't get away from it. And this race was supposed to be a break from some of that. And I felt emotions start to stir, and not in a productive way, not in a let's get it all out there sort of way, or Let's move through this more like a let's just sit in it sort of way. And that did it. That realization that that's what was happening. That's what I was on the verge of falling into. That did it. It jolted me enough to say, all right, Hicks, we got to get a handle on this and move on. So here's what I did to work through that. And again, I would offer this as a suggestion anytime you're facing these unwanted or untimely challenges. The first is take it in stride. And in my case here, it was literally take it in stride. Take a deep breath, assess the facts of the situation, and try to define your reality as objectively and unemotionally as possible. Now, it's important here for me to let you know, it's not that I think emotions don't matter. It's not that they don't need to be considered. It's certainly not that we should avoid them. It's just that not everything warrants an emotional response. And when we separate out the facts and the emotions, honestly, we're able to give each their due better. But it's hard to do when they're all mixed up together and you can't tell what's what. Some things do warrant an emotional response, and so be it. And sometimes it is productive to just go ahead, purge some emotion so that you can get on the other side of it and get to a place where you're thinking clearly. And when that happens, go for it. What I sensed happening to me was not that. It was you're just going to sit in it and carry this for the rest of the race. And I knew that would be unproductive in all respects. But what we want to try to do is get a clear-headed picture of what we're dealing with so that we can prioritize needs and make a plan to address them. And that's the next step. So step one, take it in stride. Step two is respond as needed. And the first question to ask is this something to solve or something to endure? Or maybe a little of both. Trying to endure something that can be solved is maddening and pointless. It's wasted effort. Just go on and address the problem. Trying to solve something that can only be endured is exhausting and demoralizing because no matter what we throw at it, it will be ineffective. So again, wasted effort. It's kind of the epitome of toil. So in my case, I could solve some of the mental distraction. I could solve some of the muscle fatigue. I could not, or was not willing to do what was necessary to solve the weariness. I was going to have to endure that. And I say I wasn't willing. I suppose I could have just said, I'm going to take a nap and delay my finish, but I wasn't willing to do that. I had to endure it. Once we've differentiated between what can be solved and what must be endured, then we can get down to addressing things. The third step is to account for resources and apply them as necessary. Resources might be tangible items, in my case, hydration, nutrition, gear, and equipment. They might be people, and that might come in the form of companionship and encouragement. It could come in the form of someone doing something for you, this act of service, or it could come in the form of expertise and knowledge that someone else provides that you don't have or that you need to be reminded of. And lastly, in terms of resources, there is almost always some amount of internal resource we possess, even when we don't feel like it. And we will almost always be called upon to tap into that for whatever it's worth. Sometimes we might not have that much to give. That's all right. But we'll be asked to give it however little it may be. With regard to these unwanted and untimely challenges, I want to emphasize the point about internal resources. When it comes to leaning into challenges that we choose or enjoy, we count on bringing some level of grit or inner fortitude to bear. It's likely part of what we like about that challenge. We get to exercise an endurance or problem solving or mental toughness muscle in a way that we want to. It's easy when we're hit with something that we're not expecting or don't want to deal with to fall into this trap of neglecting these internal resources, just forgetting that they're there. Maybe because some other internal narrative is screaming at us so loudly we can't think straight. Maybe we just can't muster up the willpower. But we neglect the fact that we are extraordinarily capable beings. Even when we don't feel like it, And if you get nothing else from this episode, I want you to hear that. You are capable. You are capable of squaring up to whatever the challenges that you're facing, assessing it, gathering whatever resources are available, and putting them to use to overcome it. You can do that, and I want you to know that. I want to wrap up the episode, begin to wrap up by talking specifically about some of the ways that the resource of other people allowed me to finish the race and ultimately accomplish the goals that I set out to accomplish. First of all, a huge thank you to the crew that helped. All of them offered tangible help and encouragement and objective perspective on how I was doing or what I needed throughout. Chet, who I call Chief, is a crew chief. He's like a Swiss Army knife, and he just goes above and beyond. I came into mile 18 aid station, and he met me at the trail as I entered his parking lot. He said, asked how I was doing, kind of ran through some questions, and he says, "I've got a cheeseburger for you if you want it." Now, in all honesty, I did not think I had worked hard enough up to that point to deserve a cheeseburger, but I was not going to tell the man no. So I sat down in the chair, drank the things I needed to drink, and had a cheeseburger. It was fantastic. Through the night, ate cup upon cup of these ginger noodles that he is quickly making a name around. He kept gear charged that needed to be charged and helped me keep up track of what needed to be swapped out when and where. And he just had a checklist of things that he checked in with me on as I came into aid stations and out of them. Chet's amazing. John Cox is a good friend and coach, and he was a surprise pacer for me. So this race, you run about 35 miles. You get to a spot where there's a trail system, and you run 4 loops in that trail system. And at the end of each loop, you come back to the same spot. So you're there for a while. John was there. His fiance, Becca, was running, and he was tending to her. She had some other folks with her as well. So I got ready to go out for my last 2 loops, and John said, "Hey, I'm going to run with you." It was a great surprise. John, in addition to companionship and friendship, offered a real-time assessment of some specific aspects of my race. He could speak to my pace. He could speak to my body mechanics and could affirm that kind of all systems looked good. He helped me make adjustments to my hydration specifically, but hydration and nutrition as I got ready to enter the last 30 miles of the race. And he offered kind of this overall assessment. At some point he said, "You look good, you're in control." And that was a general answer to the question in my mind of how is this thing going? I know how I feel now, but I don't know how much stock to put in how I feel. And so he was an outside observer with a level of expertise that exceeds mine, and he could offer this assessment. You look good, you're in control. Though we did not unpack specifically all that he meant by you're in control, this is what I took it to mean. A, I still had my wits about me, and B, I was able to think, assess, and make good decisions. And this declaration that he offered that I was in control was an encouragement to me to continue on in this fashion, continue on in the way that I had been up to this point. Because even if I had felt in control, there was a chance that I was delusional or inexperienced about it, right? So I could have at that point felt like everything's great and I'm in control. But I might not have known, or I might have been lying to myself. But for an expert to offer that assessment gave me great validation, and it motivated me to carry on in the same fashion that I had up to that point in the race. And I can't help but wonder if that might be a helpful consideration or metric in the broader scope of life. It is easy for me, I'm going to assume that's dangerous, I know, but I'm going to assume, I'm going to do it, that it's easy for us to zero in on 1 or 2 or 3 symptoms of the challenges that we're facing. Things that we would prefer to be going differently, things that we prefer not to be feeling or experiencing. We can zero in on those things because they create the most noise or points of pain in our life. But if with a little perspective, we could zoom out from that and see that or be reminded that we are in control, to the extent that it's possible, we are managing the things that can be managed, and we're doing a pretty good job of that. Then perhaps we can find encouragement to press on, because we can not negate or neglect or forget the things that we're feeling that aren't going well, but we can put them in the broader context of, despite these things, we're doing a lot of other things right, and it's going to pay off in the end. In the end, everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be as it should be. I don't know. It's something to consider. I want to point out in the middle of this, sharing how important and helpful it was to have a crew around me, that they couldn't be there all the time. And one of, if not the hardest stretches of the race, was a 10-mile section in between pacers. So there's this little stretch. You leave that trail system I was talking about, and you start your return to the finish line. And the first 10 miles of that, you go up and over Johns Mountain. I don't consider it a difficult part of the course. From a technical standpoint, I had no problems with it last year. I had no problems with it when I did the 50 miler. It's not that I don't respect it. It's just not been a problem for me. So I wasn't concerned about not having a pacer in that stretch. But once I left out of the aid station and all of my people and started on that 10-mile stretch in between pacers, that's when that just extreme weariness of like, I wonder if I can move and sleep. I wonder if that would work. That's when that started happening. And I don't think I slept, but I don't think I had my wits about me for that whole stretch as well. I remember being so tired, it was hard to focus on pace. It was hard to focus on some of the mechanics of my movement. I just was trying to keep moving and get to up and over the mountain down the other side to where I would find daylight and I would find a pacer. And that little section serves as a great reminder that even with people around you in life, even with the crew, there are some sections of life that we have to run alone. There are periods of time where we have to navigate some dark night of the soul on our own. And we can do it. We can put one foot in front of the other. We can even rest our head on the top of trekking poles or lean against a tree if it comes to that. And we can get through to the break of dawn in the hope that comes with a new day. So I don't want you to think that if you're in a season of life where you don't have people, that you will never have them again. And I don't want you to think that if you have people, that you will always have them. It is inevitable that you'll have stretches of life, sections of life, if we want to keep the trail analogy going, that you have to go alone. That's what I did. I got to pick up Jeff at mile 75, and I was glad to see him because I had worked hard to be there. Jeff, in his own right, had worked hard to be there. He'd been really sick all week, and early in the week had been kind of toss-up as to whether or not he was going to be there. So he made the effort, showed up as well as he could be, but not entirely well, and was ready to run the last 25 miles with me. I sat down at that aid station, and having come through that last 10-mile section, I really didn't care how long I sat there. I wasn't paying attention. And at some point, pretty quick, Jeff said to me, "How much time do you need? We need to go." And I was just like, "Shut up, Jeff. Why don't you go home?" Jeff could see that if left unchecked, I might linger a little bit. It's not the right thing to do. There was no point in it, but I might do it nonetheless. And so he went on to say, "Look, I know you don't feel great, but you look good and you're moving well, and that's what matters now. So let's keep going." And he would tell me this several other times throughout the remainder of the race. "I know you don't feel well, but you look fine and you're moving good, so let's keep going." Now, again, it's not that feelings don't count, but they don't always tell the whole story. And in this case, how I was moving, thinking, and responding told more of the story than how I felt. I felt exactly how I should feel. You get deep enough into a race, you're not supposed to feel great. So Jeff knew this. As a coach, he knows how to assess someone's, how they're actually doing versus how they feel. As a wilderness instructor, I can do the same thing. We can be out in the woods together. You can tell me how you feel, and I can know how worried I should be as an instructor, more or less. I can tell how you're really doing versus how you feel. So Jeff can do this. He's got years and years of experience. And so Jeff knew that I was good to go, and he pushed me to move, eat, and drink, and limit the breaks to reasonable amounts of time. And I trusted him to do so. In that moment, it was the exact right thing to do, to push me beyond how I was feeling, to execute on these things, because no harm was being done to me. My rebound, meaning how quickly I felt better upon rest, was almost instant. So I would stop and instantly I felt better. And there's this built-in recovery at all levels, physical, mental, and emotional after the race. As soon as the race is done, I'm going to recover physically. Any mental or emotional weight that I'm feeling is also going to be resolved, or I have this kind of built-in space to do so. And this was all voluntary, what I was doing. Sometimes in life, we need this. We need this kick in the tail. We need someone, preferably someone who has earned the right to do so, to say, look, suck it up and keep moving. I know you're worn out. I know you don't feel well. I know you don't feel like you have much left in the tank, but it's not time to stop yet. So let's keep going. And then there are times when, honestly, that's the last thing a person needs to hear. There are other times that the fact that we look great but don't feel great is an indication that we are masking, compensating, or burying ourselves deep in a hole, all in the name of maintaining the status quo. We're doing what needs to be done. I don't know how to do anything different, but wake up, do what needs to be done so that the world doesn't fall apart around me. In contrast, during those times, real harm may be being done, even if it's emotional or mental, even if that sounds dismissive. Be it emotional or mental, real harm may be being done. Rebound is not instant. You get a break and you don't recover. And it may not be entirely voluntary, even if we're choosing to do so. And what I mean by that is I suppose we all have the choice we can make to just check out of certain parts of life. But choosing not to do so doesn't always mean it's the thing that we want to do. It's just the thing that we deem necessary to do to take care of us, those around us, maybe carry on with responsibilities, whatever. It may not always be entirely voluntary. I think you get what I'm saying there. We're doing just enough to keep it all together. Even if to the untrained eye, everything looks like it's just fine. In those moments, what we need is either for someone to intervene and say, hey, look, I'm concerned about you. I know you're getting done what needs to be done, but I wonder at what cost. And I wonder if you need a break. I wonder if you need to sit a minute. Better yet, how can I help you in this place? Or if we don't have someone around us to do that, or we don't have someone that knows us well enough to do that, we have to self-assess, identify some root causes, and figure out a way to pull back to a level of output that is sustainable, lest we crash and burn. Or crash out, as I think they say now. But I could have totally misused that. I don't know. I'll wait till one of my kids listens to this and corrects me. Shifting back to the race, I'm thankful for people who knew me, who knew what I needed, and provided help, support, and encouragement that was necessary for me to get the job done. And as I got to the last few miles of the race, I was pleased to discover that I had it in me to speed up and finish strong, which is certainly evidence of having cared for myself better over the course of the entire race, which was one of my goals, and that felt good. In an effort to try and tie all of these loose ends together, I'll wrap up with a reminder or summary, I don't know. There are times in life that, ready or not, you will be required to toe the line. And when that happens, do your best to accept the reality of it, stop entertaining the unproductive what-if thoughts, and build a good, accurate narrative, and then flip the switch and sort out how, not if, you're going to get through the thing that you have to get through. And it may be that the challenge or the challenges you face will be unwanted or untimely. In fact, it's highly likely that that's how it will be, and that's okay. Do your best to take it in stride. Assess the facts of the situation and define reality as objectively as possible. Determine whether this is something to endure or something to solve, and then account for the resources and apply them as necessary. I hope that in the midst of battling challenges, you have trusted people around you, even if it's just one. And I hope that you have the humility to listen and heed their input, that you can trust what they say and take it to heart. And in the stretches where it's just you, I hope that you can remember how capable of enduring you are, that you can put one foot in front of the other and carry on, that you can see this thing through. In retrospect, I think much of this year has been this way for me. Challenges that I don't feel ready for, real life challenges, at times that I have to navigate despite not wanting to. And honestly, I don't know that this is going to let up anytime soon. So I'm thankful for the lessons learned from the Georgia Jewel. I'm thankful to have good reason to give voice to them and consider them for myself. And you can trust that I'll be working to apply them in my life moving forward as you do the same in yours. I want to hear from you. Let's make this a conversation. I'd love to hear what resonated, what didn't, what I missed, and the like. Your input makes the whole thing better, and we all learn from it. So if you're so inclined, please drop me a line at everydaygritpodcast@gmail.com. You can also send me a message on Instagram as well. But get in touch. Let me know what you think. If you like what you've heard, you think others would benefit from this episode or another, please help me by spreading the word. It means a lot, and I think that's the best way at this point to get the podcast out there to people. I would also love it if you jumped over to Apple Podcasts and left me a review. I'd be greatly appreciative of that as well. Most of all, thanks for showing up. Thanks for listening. Carry on.